I don't know anybody, I've never lived near somebody with my disease because it's just too rare.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Take a Pain Check. Today we're joined by Marissa Douglas, a 22-year-old living with juvenile dermatomyositis since early childhood.
Yeah, hi, I'm Marissa Douglas. Right now I'm getting my degree in quantitative biology, and that's really because I've always had a huge passion for animals. And I think a big part of that actually grew from being chronically ill. I spent so much time at home, either looking out the window or watching Animal Planet, and that was like what started. So I know a lot of people with my illness have gone into disease research, and I'm over here doing like animal behavior research, but it's actually a lot to thank for my disease.
Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I know we talk not that much about juvenile dermatomyositis, and it's something, or at least a condition. I think you're the first person on my podcast with this condition, so I'm excited to actually share a lot of information with our patients that are listening and rheumatologists today. Can you tell me a little bit about your diagnosis journey, when you first started getting symptoms, and what led you to go see a rheumatologist or any other specialist?
So my diagnosis is juvenile dermatomyositis, and if you break it down, it's exactly what it sounds like. So it's childhood, the juvenile, and then skin and muscle inflammation, dermatomyositis. And for me, that first was obvious to my parents because I had a rash, so the skin inflammation. And I went into a pool in Arizona, so it's really sunny, and in the pool has all these products in it, and that set off this rash to just flare up, and I came out of the pool crying. And so they started taking me to all these dermatologists to figure out what was going on with my skin. And the dermatologists were like, this seems systemic. They took a biopsy, and so they referred us to rheumatology. And so it was about a 6 months journey until I actually got to a rheumatologist. And I walked in, and the rheumatologist comes in and goes, I know what you have, which was just like incredibly lucky to have somebody pinpoint it so quickly. And so she did some muscle tests on me and asked my parents about my energy level because those are a lot harder to notice in young children. You might think like, oh, they had a cold last week, or I don't know, they were running around yesterday and that's why they're tired. But really, I had been having symptoms of chronic fatigue and muscle weakness. And so the doctor was able to actually address that and get the right diagnosis there.
When it came to growing up with this disease, did your symptoms change over time?
In some ways, yes. The general skin inflammation and muscle inflammation has been pretty much the same, but it will happen in different areas of my body. So when I was younger, I had a lot of rashiness all over the outsides of all my joints, including like my shoulders, my elbows, my knuckles, and then also on the bridge of my nose and my cheeks, which can look a lot like lupus. So it often gets misdiagnosed as lupus because they have a very similar face rash. As I've gotten older, I don't get as much of the rash on my joints. I mostly just get it on my face. And then for the muscle weakness and fatigue and stuff, I find fatigue is something I still have to deal with a lot, especially at school. If I'm getting stressed out, I really have to be good about managing my stress because then I get inflamed and then I'm fatigued and it's hard to do work and then I get more stressed about it. It's a cycle. And so that's been something that I don't think fatigue was as much of an issue as a young kid because you cannot like skip school and then not really need to make it up and it's fine. But it's become a bigger issue now. And then the muscle weakness, whenever it happens, it means I'm doing pretty poorly. And it's not always in the same areas. So it tends to stem in my core and move out. But sometimes the left side of my body it'll happen more on, or the right side of my body. So in sports, I've noticed my dominant leg has switched with flares of my disease. And then I also started having issues with my neck becoming weak in high school. I didn't have any issues with neck weakness as a child. And then my freshman year of high school, I started having weakness there. And so then I'd have issues swallowing. And then that was a big problem.
Wow, okay, so you've definitely been through a lot. Were there any ways that you managed those symptoms?
Yes, I mean, of course, there's medications. I imagine a lot of listeners are familiar with prednisone, and it's like the good bad drug. It works really quickly, reduces inflammation, but it's just sucks to be on. And then outside of traditional medications, I also We'll go to physical therapy. I got a mental health therapist. That was huge for managing my stress. I definitely think mental health therapy is really useful to incorporate with chronic illnesses. And then I ended up seeing a specialist and she had a lot of helpful tips, but I think the main thing was really viewing it all holistically and managing my stress and accepting that I just have certain limits. I need to be sleeping more than my peers, and I'll always need to sleep more than my peers, and just being okay with that. And I need to take breaks to decompress and being okay with that.
Throughout school, did you have any accommodations?
Yes, yes, big fan of accommodations. So I was diagnosed when I was 6. So first, I happened to be in a private school, so there I think the accommodations work differently. But in second grade, I moved to a public school, so we got me a 504 plan, which then you get like a doctor's note saying what kind of accommodations you need, and the school kind of negotiates with them with you. Basically, usually it's just wording stuff. But I think what was more important than the 504 plan was my parents teaching me how to communicate my accommodations with my teachers. Because I know I have a lot of friends who feel like even though they have some sort of accommodation plan, their accommodations still aren't met. But sometimes I think after years of that, they build some resentment, and then the way they communicate maybe isn't always as clear as it could be. And it's hard not to build resentment because it's like you deserve to have your needs met. But then professors aren't always going to respond well to that. And then in college, similarly, I don't think it's called a 504, but I've set up accommodations through whichever office does it at whichever school I'm at.
We talked a little bit of sort of the other stressors and triggers that happen with, flares. And flares is something that are pretty common with people living with rheumatic disease. I have them all the time. So can you talk a little bit about how you mentioned sleeping early and kind of managing your health in that sense. What do these flares look like for you?
It all kind of depends on how long I decide to pretend it's not happening. So sometimes I'll start getting fatigued and I'll be really in tune with my body, or I'll have muscle aches, or my skin's really reacted to the sun. And so I'll let my doctor know. I'll be really good about my sunscreen and good about my sleep. I'll let my teachers know. But sometimes I'll be like, no, I'll just muscle through it and it'll be fine and it'll just go away. And then it usually snowballs and becomes worse. So when I really start to flare and really start to become weak and start needing to add more medications, I'm usually looking at anywhere from a 2 month to 2 year recovery, depending on how bad it gets. But if I'm good about catching it early, I can usually just take a few days break. And that's where the accommodations are really helpful. So for me, my accommodations include excused absences, being able to turn things in late. When I was in my undergraduate, being able to live in a single room, so I didn't have to worry about a roommate disrupting my sleep or spreading any viruses. So things like that that really allow me to have my own time and space to heal are really important.
Yeah, I definitely think living alone is helpful for me too because as we know, we're like immunocompromised, so it's easy for us to catch any viruses or sickness. It's like 10 times worse than someone else if they were to get it. So I understand exactly what that's like. So I'm glad that you were able to put those like preventative measures in to make sure that, when you do go to school, it's gonna be okay and you'll be fine. And also kind of your daily living would be good as well. Can you talk a little bit about kind of like the sun and chlorine, these sorts of things that might affect skin in particular?
Yeah, so if you have a rheumatic disease or any other inflammatory disease that sets off your skin, UV tends to be a big trigger. So I have to be really good about sunscreening or getting clothes that cover my shoulders and arms and everything. Granted, I'm sometimes terrible about it because I'm vain and I love a tan. But I know that then I'm gonna feel bad for days if I do that. And so I really do try to be good about having sunscreen on anywhere. And then if my skin becomes really sensitive, that's when other chemicals start becoming an issue. So right now I can jump in a chlorine pool and be okay because I'm pretty stable right now. But when I was little and we were treating basically the wrong stuff for 6 months and my skin just kept getting worse, it was like I couldn't go in chlorine pools. I couldn't help with cleaning supplies, like I couldn't wipe off desks in school or anything like that because all of those abrasive chemicals would just set off my skin and it would get red and bumpy and hurt. And that's also what the sun does if I'm in the sun too long.
What about the treatment options?
I mentioned kind of the emergency drug is prednisone, calms everything down. And that's, for anybody who doesn't know, it's called a corticosteroid. So it's not like steroids that make you strong. In fact, if you're on it too long, you can become weaker. But it just shuts down your immune system. And then other immunosuppressants, so methotrexate, which is originally a chemo drug, and then I take Plaquenil. It's also called hydroxychloroquine. That was originally an anti-malarial drug, but it works pretty well for autoimmune diseases. We don't really know why. And it's not an immunosuppressant like the other two. And then IVIG is one of the most common ones. So this is infusion immunoglobulin. So when people go to donate their plasma, we can take out bits of their plasma called antibodies. And so you can specifically take out an antibody called immunoglobulin, and that's given to me as an infusion. So I'm basically taking people's donated immune systems every 3 weeks. And I still do that every 3 weeks. And that IVIG, that infusion, is by far the most effective medication for me. Now, all four of those medications that are the most popular, for the longest time, none of them were actually FDA approved for dermatomyositis because no drugs were, because it's such a rare disease. But just recently, one of the brands of IVIG got approved, but everything else is technically not approved. And we mostly borrow from rheumatoid arthritis. Actually, we just borrow a lot of rheumatoid arthritis drugs. And then there's a whole bunch of other ones. There's two new things coming out that maybe some people have heard of that I haven't tried, but I'm hearing good stuff about. JAK inhibitors. I'll see commercials for them, JAK, but they're pretty new. And then there's this really new thing that's still in trials that I would like to eventually try if it goes well. That's CAR T, so CAR-T, and that would actually be effectively a cure if it works. So they kind of take some of your cells and rewrite your immune system and give it back to you. So then it functions how it's supposed to. So that would be really exciting because right now our current things are like regular infusions that make you feel sick and you have to get so frequently, or immunosuppressants that put you at risk of being sick and have all these other side effects. So if this new stuff works, that'd be really exciting. But I haven't actually gotten to try any of the new stuff.
I've been through so many different medication options in that now I'm just like, okay, well, if this doesn't work, what's next? And then knowing that there'll be more discoveries, I think that'll be super amazing for patients like us. So I'm excited to see what's kind of in the pipeline for rheumatic diseases. And then I wanted to talk to you as well, because I mean, I've taken a lot of infusions and they struggle to find my vein. I've been just like poking and like seeing, oh, is it here? No, it's not. Okay, next arm. So what is the experience like for you in terms of infusion? I know you mentioned the fatigue aspect. I definitely felt super tired after it, but what about like the vein aspect or anything else?
Yeah, the vein aspect for me was great for a long time. I wonder if I can, for any viewers out there, I've got pretty good hand veins that are pretty visible, and if they cinch me up, you can see my arms. So the size of my veins is fine, and I've got scars all over the place. But I've been getting my infusions for almost 17 years now, and so my veins are starting to kind of give up. And so what I found is after every infusion, I get this pain in my arm that almost feels like there's a string being pulled taut where the vein is, which means it's starting to, I can't even really remember the word, but it's basically starting to harden and not want to take fluids. And so if I drink a ton and a ton of water and dilute everything going in my body, that helps a bit. But I do think at this point, since it's been 16 years of using basically 4 spots, I'm starting to look at getting a port. So that would be basically an implanted infusion in my chest that goes and runs up your jugular down basically to your heart. And so with that, they would be able to infuse straight into a really large vessel. And in doing that, it's less irritating. But to be honest, I think I like to live my life sometimes in denial that anything's wrong. And I have some fear that if I can visually see this um, device all the time, I'm going to have a hard time with that mentally at first, which is such a place of privilege to be in. But I'm definitely worried about how I am going to how it'll affect my body image if I now have a device under my skin that I can see all the time. Plus, I think it's going to give me the heebie-jeebies. Like I have a one scar on my knee that I still can't touch, and it wasn't even a bad injury, but it's just like, ugh.
No, I understand what you mean. There's definitely different things that you can do to make the situation better, but it all depends on, what you want to do at the end of the day. So if that's something that's going to work for you, then that's something you should definitely do, but there's always going to be alternative options. You talked a little bit about body image. Can you talk to me about how the juvenile dermatomyositis has shaped your self-image over time?
In college, I started doing karate. I had done karate as a little kid, and then in college I did it. And then part of your getting your black belt, you have to like reflect on your athletic journey, which made me really reflect on how my body has worked for me over the last 22, almost 23 years. And I realized that my disease has periodically flared probably every 3 years. And when that happens, I become weaker. I definitely start looking like, because my muscles atrophy, you start looking softer, you're on steroids, you start gaining weight. And so there are a few things that happened. One, I would always quit whatever sport I was in. And I think that played a lot on my, maybe not body image, but like just what I thought myself capable of, because I would start being weaker and I'm falling behind the other kids. And so I wouldn't want to play anymore. And then I would just try a new sport after that because I wouldn't want to catch up because I was embarrassed about how much I had lost during my flare. And then the weight gain I had a really hard time with because with the steroid weight gain, it's this swelling that basically happens. So your cheeks get really swollen, and then I didn't want to smile in photos because I didn't like how big my cheeks get, and I still don't. Like I think if I went on prednisone now, I would still have these same issues. And you just gain a lot of weight, and I never have really gotten the weight off. Like I think between I think my freshman year I gained like of high school I gained like 30 pounds on prednisone, and I actually never it never went away, and maybe part of that was puberty, I don't know. But it definitely has affected me because I want a body that I feel like a lot of the self-image stuff you're given is like love your body because it keeps you alive and love what it does for you. But I think that's hard when you have a chronic illness because it feels like it's barely keeping you alive and you're always at odds with your body. So it, like if you don't like what it looks like and it's not working well for you, that can be really challenging. So I've been lucky that I have a mom who just hypes me up constantly and makes me helps me find clothes that look good on my body, helps me feel good about the way my body looks. But I think I still have a really hard time with feeling grateful for all my body allows me to do, because there's also so many people who do more, but it's something that I'm always working on because there's still so much I can do. But it just becomes easy to focus on what you can't do.
You mentioned martial arts and like how that's been a pretty big part of your life. Did you also do any other dance or anything like that?
Yeah, yeah. So my sports career was I did karate as a kid, and then gymnastics, and then volleyball, and then in college I went back to karate, and then I've always loved dancing, but I never did it competitively or with any training. I just liked like dancing in the bathroom and around the house. But then in college, I saw a friend post a video of her dancing in heels, and it reminded me a lot of what you'd see in like a Beyonce music video. And I'm like, that is what I want to do. And so I joined this class that was just a student-run club. It was free, and it really fit with how I like to exercise. It was an activity that didn't hurt. And it made me feel good about my body and how I look and what I'm capable of. So it's just like all the things I needed. And it was this community of people who were just really supportive. And so I ended up doing that for 2.5 years. And the last year of it, I was actually the co-president of the group. That was really good for me. I haven't found that in Atlanta yet, but I'm hunting.
Hopefully you'll find it soon. I wanted to ask you, like, you were diagnosed really, really young. So how did you even know that you had this disease?
I don't think I personally knew. I mean, I think I knew my skin hurt and that sucked. And I knew that I wasn't winning my sparring matches anymore in karate, and I didn't know why. Because so I realized going back that the time I quit karate was the first time my disease was showing symptoms and it was untreated. So I would have been getting weaker and tired just as I'm learning how to spar these other kids who I used to be able to win. And now I'm not winning, and my skin hurts. But both of my parents are medical professionals. So I think for them, they feed into, oh, we should definitely get this rash checked. This isn't normal. And so it's really, I have to credit my parents for noticing that.
And then when you had to explain it to your peers growing up or people around you, how did that work?
Well, my parents did their best to explain as much as they could to me at whatever age I was at. So I think probably when I was 6, probably all I knew was I have skin and muscle inflammation, and sometimes I get headaches and I get tired. But I think I could explain that to my friends, and of course, like my teachers and the school nurse knew. So anytime I wasn't feeling well, I would just go hang out in the nurse's office till I felt like I could go back to class.
What about any friends that you made? How did you explain it to them as you grew up?
Well, I think I realized I had kind of been under explaining it for a long time and not really making a big deal out of it because I mean, I don't want it to run my life. And when I'm stable, it's not too bad. But I did realize in my freshman year of high school when I flared really badly, I felt like a lot of my friends abandoned me and weren't there for me. And then later in talking to them, I realized they didn't know how bad it was because I think without realizing I was kind of hiding what was going on. So I think even to them, I would tell them like, oh, I have these things that are wrong with my body, but I take medications and the medications work. And so the main thing my friends really were good about was I'd explain to them that if I get sick, that's really bad. So if they have some sort of cold and we're supposed to hang out, they need to tell me because I shouldn't be around them. But I think beyond that, that was really the extent of what they knew. And it wasn't until I met some people with my disease at a conference for my disease. And so they really got it. And I've stayed friends with them still to this day. So I was probably 12 when I met them. So we've been friends for a while now. And that's been really powerful to have people who can relate to me, that I don't have to explain all the things and they understand that it's serious, even if we make light of it.
I relate to you in the sense that even when I'm hanging out with my friends, I always tell them, like, if you're sick, please let me know because, as we mentioned, it can be pretty serious. And then I'm glad that they're able to accommodate you in different activities and stuff. And, you always need friends that understand or maybe not even understand because they will never understand, but people that can accommodate you. I'd say like people that are understanding of what you're going through and can accommodate you. I feel like it's hard because sometimes you might feel like I'm saying no all the time, like what will they think, or like I can't make these plans, like do they think I'm just making excuses? And I feel like for the longest time I felt that way, but now I'm just like, okay, if they don't understand, then I can't be friends with them because you just have to learn what to prioritize. And I guess growing up, like I never thought of it that way. I was sort of like, okay, what are these people gonna think? And like, but in reality, the people you choose really need to understand in that sense and be understanding of your situation. Do you feel like that as well?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I think in addition to that, a hard lesson to learn is if you are becoming friends with somebody and they get offended by you needing time or hurt by you needing to rest, then they're probably not somebody who you really want in your circle. And it hurts at first, but then you realize you really want people around you who support you and you can support back. And one thing I do need to give my friends a lot of credit for is I think pretty much every infusion I had a friend who came, whether that was when I was little, it was more my mom's friends who were sort of like aunts to me would come and hang out with me during my infusions. So I always felt like during my treatments, I wasn't alone and I was distracted from them. And that was really good. And that was actually one of the hardest things in college and even now getting used to is like now I go to the hospital by myself, and like my boyfriend boyfriend will come have lunch with me, but the rest of the day, I don't really know the nurses yet. It's just me. So it has been really nice having a community during my treatments.
That's amazing. And I think even for me, having friends that live with the disease versus having friends that don't live with the disease, it's pretty different in the conversations you might be able to have and the support system or support you may get from both of them. When did you actually meet people that lived with your disease, if you have?
Yeah, so I met people with my disease. There's this group called Cure JM that does all of the like funding work for my disease and funds the research and everything. And they do a yearly conference. And I think I went to it when I feel like I look about 12 or 13 in the photo. So that was when I met people with my disease. And for whatever reason, it affects more girls than boys, or more girls are diagnosed than boys. I don't know if maybe boys aren't getting diagnosed as much. Um, and so I met a lot of girls around my age with the same disease, and those friendships have been really powerful. There was one who even I had to go see a specialist in DC, and the friend lived in New York. So then we went and stayed with her for a few days. And that specialist was her main rheumatologist. So she was able to, you know, give me some insight before I even met the rheumatologist. And then I have another friend in California who she's a few years older than me. So she was able to give me all this advice before I started college about what to be ready for. And so that's been really great. And my older friend, she's actually about to have her first baby, and she's so excited because a lot of the medications we take can be really bad for fertility. And so it's been really fun to have each other in our lives through these milestones. So if you can find a community, and I think it helps that not only are we chronically ill, but we have the exact same diagnosis. So if you can find people with the same diagnosis who just really get every aspect of it, and you can give each other advice, you can give each other support. And then, of course, you're also friends outside of that. Like, we don't only talk about our illnesses. That's really nice. I just wish I had people local. I don't know anybody, I've never lived near somebody with my disease because it's just too rare.
Maybe one day you'll meet someone. I think I'm definitely trying to learn more about rheumatic diseases and meet new people with different types of rheumatic diseases because I know that, although our symptoms may be a little bit different, it's pretty similar in terms of the flares, the fatigue, the joint pain, the muscle pain. Like, I relate a lot to that. And like being diagnosed is like, I was diagnosed at 13. So being a young person and being diagnosed. But yeah, definitely like, I mean, in Canada, at least, for people around me, like I know a lot of people in my area that do live with juvenile arthritis, but I think that your condition is even more rare. So there are definitely people out there. It's just really trying to find them and seeing where they are because they're probably looking for support too. I wanted to ask you about your advocacy journey. Like, how did you start advocating for yourself?
My parents, my parents always made me advocate for myself. It was never that, I mean, they're of course there to support me and tell me what to say, but they always wanted me to feel empowered. So even when I was in first grade, I would tell my teachers, hey, I'm not feeling well, or hey, I need you to let me go 5 minutes before lunch so I can put on sunscreen. That was funny. For a long time, I had to have sunscreen listed as a medication so that I'd be allowed to leave in time to put it on before recess. And then, as then of course you get older and you start emailing. And so for me, like I said, both my parents are in the medical world, and in the medical world, there's this acronym called SBAR. So it's SBAR, and it stands for Summary Background. How am I blanking on this all of a sudden? Assessment, summary, background, assessment, and recommendation. But the way it works is it's basically when doctors are communicating with each other, this is how they write out their messages. So they have a first sentence that's a really quick summary about what's going on, and then the background about why they think it's that way, and then the assessment of like basically this is so the background might be like the symptoms are this, the assessment is I think the diagnosis is this, and then the recommendation of what should you do next. But it is so hard to remember S bar because it's like not a word. It's just things. So I'm trying to get people to catch on to seen. So SEEN, like I need to be seen. So it would still be summary, evidence, and then your why am I blanking on this all? right now, of course. Summary evidence evaluation next steps. So it's the same thing, but just a summary of what's going on, and then your evidence of why you think this is going on, your evaluation of what you think it means, and what you need from the doctor. And then I use this when I'm talking to my teachers too. And so this has worked like pretty seamlessly for advocacy. So at the beginning of every semester, I email all of my teachers in one mass email, and I include the accommodations coordinator. And it's usually something like, hello, I'm emailing you because I have accommodations in your class for this thing. This is what goes on with me and the accommodations I have. This is how I will communicate with you. And going forward, um, like I will let you know when I need help and feel free to reach out and talk to me. So opening that door of communication, which can be tough for a lot of people, and you're absolutely not required to or expected to disclose all your medical information. But I've found that in being open with my teachers and doctors about what's going on, I've been able to get care pretty quickly and to actually fit my needs how I need them. So that has been really important.
That's amazing. And then you've learned now to also advocate for others, I'm assuming. Can you talk a little bit about your journey and what you do kind of outside of your own self advocacy? How do you kind of advocate for others in this space?
Yeah, so there's a CureJM advocates group, and again, CureJM is the organization for juvenile myositis. And so I'm part of the Advocates Council, and we meet every 2 months, but I'm hoping to get us to start meeting more frequently. And we'll always have a theme for our discussions about basically what we need from our communities, what we need from our doctors, what are we talking about as patients, and then we have one person who's kind of our leader, and they take all that information from our meetings and bring it to the actual board of the organization to be like, this is what we are needing as young patients. So it's an advocate council for, I think most of us are between 14 and 25. And then we're trying to get this thing going where we sort of have a buddy system where there's a younger patient that we match up with, but we've been having a hard time. I don't know if people are interested in it or if we're just not advertising it well. It hasn't really taken off yet, but I think that would be good to have older, younger pairings of patients as well. Right now, our main thing is being able to take stuff to the board of what we would like to see as patients.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm glad that there are opportunities like that for patients to definitely be involved and find support. So if anyone who's listening may be interested, this may be a great way for them to also be engaged. Can you talk a little bit about, life outside the illness? Like what are you mentioned a little bit about your interests and passions, but what else do you do?
I'm still looking for dance, but I have started a new martial arts now. I'm doing capoeira, which is a Brazilian martial arts that's kind of somewhere in between dance and fighting. And then I really like creative outlets, and I'm so bad about making time for them, but I love painting and ceramics. And I know there's a ceramic studio at Georgia Tech now that I can use. So I think one of my goals this next year is one, no more homework after dinner. If it's after dinner, I'm resting for the rest of the evening. If I haven't gotten it done, it'll happen the next day. That's my main thing. And then number two, more creative outlets, because I find that that really brings me a lot of joy. But to be honest, so much of my life is run by school because it is now what I am getting paid to do. But it's because I love it. I love researching. I love the process of learning. It's not just that it's like an unbalanced thing. It really is what I'm passionate about.
Thanks for sharing. So, I wanted to end off the podcast episode with some reflections and kind of like pieces of advice. So, what would you tell someone who's in a flare and kind of scared that they're gonna have to, or let me reword this. Sorry. What are you most proud of, despite like everything that you've overcome with your disease? But what are you the most proud of, in terms of your whole journey?
I think the thing I am the most proud of is even though I might have sort of temporarily given up on sports here and there, I've never gave up on my passions academically. I would have to get behind in class sometimes, and that was hard, but like I've always loved school, and I knew that I wanted to get a graduate degree, and there were times when it just seemed impossible because I mean, school alone can be enough of a stressor to cause a flare. And then it's like, what do I do now? But even with that, I've always been able to, through self-advocacy and my accommodations and just my own, I guess, drive, been able to figure out how to balance this. And I think I am getting to a point where now I'm trying to think about what kind of career will I be able to balance this? Because right now, when it's classes and research, there's a lot of flexibility, and I'm not sure what my career is going to look like. But I haven't been able to I haven't had to give up on any of the things I really want to do. I've always found a way to make it work, even when I'm at my sickest. And a lot of that is because of the support I had as well.
If you were sitting across from a teen who's overwhelmed by long term treatment with their disease right now, what would you want them to hear without minimizing how hard it is?
Be okay being a little bit selfish. You feel terrible right now. And if you pretend you don't feel terrible right now, people are not going to assume that you do. Be okay telling people that you feel bad, you need that support, and you don't have the bandwidth to give a lot right now. I think it's important to have a give and take in life, but it doesn't always have to be at the same time. Sometimes you just need to receive love and care, and you can ask for that, and that's not wrong. Find your people and ask for what you deserve.
Thank you so much, Marissa, for sharing your story and for being so honest about the physical side of JDM and also the mental toll, especially around stress, transitions, advocacy, and identity. If you're listening to this episode today and it resonated with you, please make sure to share it with someone who needs it and leave a comment down below. It helps more patients and families to find these conversations. We'll also link Marissa's social media pages down below as well as Cure JM resources in the description below. Everyone, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see everyone next time on Take a Pain Check. Thank you so much, Marissa.
Thank you.